What would you do if someone took a hammer and crushed your child's fingers simply because they were in a wheelchair? This isn't a riddle or a grim what-if. It actually happened to my daughter, Bella, right outside our home, in what's supposed to be a peaceful suburban neighborhood run by a homeowners association. Bella is only 9, she's paralyzed from the waist down. And yet, some heartless soul decided she was such an eyesore that she deserved to suffer. Her so-called crime? Sitting in our front yard in her wheelchair, happily watching the birds. And the person who did it wasn't some random intruder, a vandal, or a troubled stranger. No, it was our very own HOA president, Rylin Graham, a woman who strutted around the block as if she owned every blade of grass, looking at everyone else like we were beneath her. I know it sounds impossible to believe. Most people wouldn't imagine someone like Rylin could be so cruel, but she was and still is. Worst of all, Bella couldn't even lift her hand to protect herself. She just sat there, frozen in shock, as that woman lifted a hammer and brought it crashing down on my little girl's fingers. I watched it happen, not out of fear or blind dragia, at least, not yet, because deep down, I'd seen the warning signs. I'd even set up a camera in advance. She had no idea she was being filmed. Before I tell you how we got justice, let me ask you, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Share your answer below, don't hold back, because if it could happen to Bella, it could happen to anyone's child, and someone has to speak up. My name is Troy Ferguson. I'm a father, a widower, and a man who thought he'd seen the worst humanity could do until it walked up my driveway wearing a smug grin and HOA credentials. I spent 21 years in the Army, including 3 tours overseas. I witnessed cruelty in war zones, but nothing ever punched me in the gut like seeing my little girl in agony, her tiny fingers turning purple, mangled by blunt force just because someone decided she didn't belong. Bella came into this world fighting. She was born premature, barely 4 pounds, but louder than thunder. Her mother, Julia, called her our little firecracker, and that spark in her never faded, and not even after everything that happened. Last summer changed everything. We were driving home from Bella's physical therapy when a pickup barreled through a red light and smashed into us. I walked away with a few broken ribs and a collapsed lung. Bella wasn't so lucky. The spinal injuries left her paralyzed from the waist down. Doctors told us she'd never walk again. I remember sitting beside her hospital bed that night. Bella, flat on her back in a neck brace, looked up at me with those big blue eyes and whispered, "It's okay, Daddy. We can still play board games." She was comforting me at just 9 years old, more worried about cheering me up than crying for herself. After that, I left the Army to care for her full-time. We moved to a quiet cul-de-sac in Georgia, a street lined with trimmed lawns and white picket fences. The house wasn't fancy, but I built Bella a wheelchair ramp myself. Out front, I planted a butterfly garden just for her. She loved sitting on the porch, doing schoolwork, watching butterflies dance in the sun. But I soon learned that quiet and peaceful were more marketing than reality. It began with little things: notes in our mailbox complaining about medical equipment being visible, suggestions to hide the wheelchair when it wasn't in use, gentle reminders that our yard didn't match community standards. At first, I brushed it off as someone being overly picky, but then, the messages turned darker, warnings that felt more like threats. So, I asked to meet the HOA board. That's when I met Rylin Graham in person. She had that way of smiling while cutting you down, dressed in pearls and pastel sweaters. She spoke in sugary tones that dripped with contempt. "We're just trying to keep the neighborhood up to standard," she'd say, tilting her head like she cared. "It's nothing personal, Mr. Ferguson, but some homeowners are concerned about the broken bar atmosphere." My daughter's wheelchair had become an atmosphere issue. I kept my calm. I explained Bella's disability, reminded them of our rights, and pointed out that no HOA rule could override the Americans with Disabilities Act. Rylin just kept smiling and replied, "Well, a broken bar, sometimes it isn't just about what's technically allowed." She told me, "It's about what's appropriate." I wanted to snap right then, but I didn't. Years in the Army had taught me that sometimes it's better to let people underestimate you, let them see a weary father, burdened and harmless, and then, when the moment's right, strike with calm precision. So I kept my head down and paid attention. I saved every email, took careful notes, set up cameras around the house too in the open, and one cleverly hidden inside what looked like an ordinary porch light. And, above all, I kept loving my daughter. Every night, Bella would sit outside wrapped in her favorite blanket, gently humming along with the wind chimes we'd hung together. That soft, musical clinking anchored me more than I realized. So when I say I saw it coming, I mean it. I didn't know exactly how far Rillian would go, but I knew there was venom in her heart. What I couldn't imagine, what no father truly thinks will happen, is someone going so far as to try to crush the light in a child like Bella. But when she finally did, I was ready. If you'd seen Rillian Graham from across the street, you might have thought she was harmless, the sort who brings homemade cookies to Sunday bake sales, who lovingly waters her azaleas each morning, and says bless your heart while quietly tearing you apart with her eyes. But up close, you could feel the chill beneath her perfect smile, the silent message, you don't belong here. She was in her late 50s, always dressed like she was headed to a garden club meeting, hair sprayed so tightly it wouldn't move in a gale, pearl earrings, pastel cardigans, and those quiet, rubber-soled shoes that never seemed to make a sound. Yet somehow, everyone always felt her presence before seeing her. Rillian carried herself like a queen reigning over a private kingdom, and in many ways, she did. The HOA bylaws might as well have had her signature engraved on them. For years, she ruled our cul-de-sac with an iron clipboard. If someone's grass grew half an inch too tall, a warning letter showed up. Hang your Christmas lights too early? Expect a polite knock and a scolding. Leave your trash cans out where they could be seen? You'd get slapped with a fine. Most folks kept quiet and obeyed. The few who dared to resist didn't last. There was a retired couple down the block who painted their shutters red. Rillian claimed it clashed with the neighborhood's historical color scheme. Within a couple of months, they had a lien on their home and moved out by the start of summer. So when she caught sight of Bella sitting peacefully in our front yard, wrapped in her blanket with a storybook in hand, I recognized the look on her face. It wasn't kindness, it was calculation. One afternoon, as I was trimming the hedges, she approached me, clipboard in hand like a royal scepter. "Mr. Ferguson," she chirped sweetly, "I just wanted to discuss your situation." I straightened up, wiping sweat from my brow. "My situation? Well," she said, tilting her head slightly, "we all understand your daughter is, dealing with a condition, and while, of course, everyone feels sympathy, it's becoming something of a visual disruption." My stomach tightened. "Visual disruption?" She nodded, lips pursed. "Several neighbors have mentioned feeling uneasy about the wheelchair ramp and the arrangement in your yard." "You mean Bella's butterfly garden?" I asked, my voice cold. Her smile faltered just for a second. "Yes, that, and the chair always being outside. We're trying to maintain a certain visual harmony, you see, for everyone's property values." I felt my jaw clench so hard it hurt. "My daughter enjoys sitting out here. The garden stays," I told her evenly. "The ramp is required by law. If that's a problem, feel free to take it up with my lawyer." She blinked, taken aback. "There's no need to get defensive," she said, voice sweet as spoiled milk. "I'm only passing along concerns. As HOA president, I have a responsibility to the community." That was Rillian's favorite phrase, a responsibility to the community. I'd read it in her emails over and over, always sent before dawn, always tagged high importance. On the surface, they were polite, but the malice seeped through every carefully chosen word. When we threw Bella a small birthday party of just 2 friends, a cake, and later Rillian knocked on the door barely 15 minutes in, complaining about an unauthorized gathering and excessive noise. The noise she meant? Children giggling and blowing bubbles. Another day, she stopped by to ask, as though she were commenting on the weather, if Bella's wheelchair could be kept in the garage when not in use. "Some of the neighbors find it unsettling," she said, as if my daughter's presence itself was an eyesore. But it wasn't just the words that made Rillian dangerous. It was the quiet. Her power didn't come from shouting, it came from softly spoken threats, from years of quietly crushing anyone who dared resist her. People didn't fear what she'd say, they feared what she could do, what she could ruin. Now, her gaze had turned fully on us. But what Rillian Graham didn't understand, what she couldn't even imagine, was that she'd chosen the wrong family this time. It happened on a Thursday, One of those mornings so calm you almost forget the world can flip into cruelty in a heartbeat. Bella had just wrapped up her online reading group. She asked if she could sit outside and watch the butterflies. I'd planted milkweed and lavender just for her. And it had worked. Monarchs floated through like living jewels, swallowtails flickered around the blooms, and every so often, a hummingbird zipped in, fast as thought. It was her sanctuary and, if I'm honest, mine too. I set her up with a cup of lemonade, a book, and her stuffed bear, Oliver. I stayed nearby on the porch, sanding a piece of pine for a toy chest I was making her. Everything felt peaceful, until I saw her, Rylin Graham, dressed in a beige pantsuit, face set like granite, clipboard tucked under one arm, phone in hand. Her heels tapped the sidewalk like slow, deliberate war drums. I stood and gave a polite nod. She didn't nod back. Instead, she stepped off the sidewalk, marching straight across our lawn, eyes locked on Bella. "Miss Graham," I called, stepping down from the porch. "Is there something I can help you with?" She didn't even look at me. Bella peeked up from her book and gave her a shy wave. Rylin didn't return it. She stared at my daughter like she was something foul stuck to her shoe. Then, in a voice as cold as polished stone, she said, "I told you not to leave that thing out here." My stomach dropped. "Excuse me?" I said, already striding toward them. She pointed first at the wheelchair ramp, then at the chair itself. "I gave you every chance to comply," she spat, "every warning, every grace." Bella blinked, confused. Her little voice barely a whisper, "I'm just reading." And then it happened, so quickly, it almost didn't feel real. Rylin let her clipboard fall. From her oversized tote bag, she pulled out a claw hammer like something you'd keep in a garage tool chest. She raised it high over her head and brought it crashing down onto the armrest of Bella's wheelchair. Bella's scream tore through the air, a sound so raw, so terrified, it froze my blood. But Rylin wasn't done. The first blow twisted the aluminum frame. The second slammed into Bella's hand, crushing her fingers against the cold metal. She dropped Oliver. Her lemonade spilled into the grass. Her body curled in agony. Something inside me broke free. Training took over. "Stop!" I roared, sprinting forward, tackling Rylin from behind. The hammer flew from her grasp and clattered onto the concrete. She shrieked, not in pain, but in outrage. "You assaulted me." I was enforcing community rules. I didn't waste breath on her. I scooped Bella into my arms. Her hand was swelling fast, skin turning mottled shades that made my heart twist. I wrapped her fingers in the hem of my shirt and dialed 911. Paramedics arrived 6 minutes later. Police came 3 minutes after that. Rylin never stopped. She paced the sidewalk, barking at officers, claiming Bella had lunged at her, that the wheelchair was a hazardous obstruction, and she was acting to protect neighborhood safety. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I barely spoke, because 3 days earlier, I'd installed a new camera in the upstairs window, covering the entire yard in crisp, high-definition clarity. Every moment of her attack, every word, every swing, every scream I captured. When the officer asked for my statement, I didn't say a word. I just handed them a flash drive. One of the younger officers, Mitchell, took the flash drive. I watched through the cruiser window as he played the footage. The color drained from his face. "I'll be right back," he said quietly. Rylin, still pacing and ranting at the other officer, sensed something shift. "He's lying," she snapped, her voice sharp and desperate. "He isn't even supposed to have cameras. That's a privacy violation." Mitchell returned, but this time his tone had changed. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me." Rylin let out a sharp laugh. "On what grounds?" He pulled out the cuffs. "Assault with a deadly weapon, aggravated battery against a disabled minor. You have the right to remain silent." A broken bar. Her laugh caught in her throat, turning into a panicked gasp. "Number." "No, you don't understand. I am the HOA president. I represent the community." He didn't flinch. He cuffed her and she kicked, screamed, and tried to twist away. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains. Some stepped outside, phones raised, recording everything. Word spread fast. Before the ambulance doors closed, Bella looked up at me through tear-glossed eyes. "Daddy, a broken bar. Did I do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart," I whispered, my voice breaking. You did everything right. We spent the night at the hospital. 3 of Bella's tiny fingers were fractured. 1 needed surgery to reset the joint. Doctors said she'd heal, but we both knew the real scars wouldn't be on her hand, even through the pain. Bella worried about her butterfly garden. Do you think the monarchs missed me today? She asked, her voice heavy with medication. They're waiting for you, I told her, just like always, but I wasn't waiting anymore. I'd spent months trying to keep peace, believing that patience and civility could protect us, but decency doesn't stop someone with a hammer. I filed for a restraining order, pressed full charges, contacted the HOA Oversight Board, the local news, the Ada Officia and my old legal buddies from the military. I didn't raise my voice, I raised the truth. That night by Bella's hospital bed, I couldn't sleep. I sat there holding her uninjured hand, her bandaged one propped on a splint. When she woke, her first question was if she'd still be able to draw. That question cracked something inside me. I realized that silence and civility weren't shields, they were invitations for bullies to push further. Raylan hadn't just crossed a line, she'd destroyed it. And now, it was my turn, not with fists, but with proof, process, and resolve. The next morning, I called an old army friend, Ron Avery, now a disability rights attorney. I didn't have to say much, he'd already seen the footage. I'll handle the civil case, he said. You handle the truth. I shared the video with a local reporter I trusted, as someone who'd covered elder abuse and veterans issues before. Within 2 days, our story was on the front page and aired by the local CBS affiliate. The headline read, HOA President arrested for assaulting disabled girl, father catches attack on video. From there, everything snowballed. Viewers flooded the HOA's website, demanding Raylan's removal. A neighborhood petition started up without me even asking. Turns out, we weren't the only ones she'd stepped on. Then came an unexpected twist. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. This time, I wasn't invited as a homeowner facing a reprimand, but as a witness. When I walked into that meeting room, the board sat at a long table, flanked by community members holding up phones, recording. Conversations stopped. The vice president, a quiet woman named Cheryl Hammond, stood. Troy, thank you for coming, she began. On behalf of the board, I want to say we're sorry. We failed to act sooner. I hadn't expected that. Cheryl cleared her throat, her voice steady but somber. What you might not know is that you're not the first resident Raylan targeted. We've had complaints, of formal ones. Most families left because they didn't want the fight. She passed around a folder. Inside the folder were copies of complaints. One from a single mother whose autistic son's therapy swing had been labeled a visual nuisance. Another from a veteran with a prosthetic leg who'd been fined for excessive yard signage after planting a small American flag in his grass. Cheryl met my eyes. You were the first to fight back with proof. I stood and shared our story, detail by detail, no embellishments, just facts. When I finished, I said only one thing: if this can happen to Bella, it can happen to anyone's child. The room fell silent, and not the awkward kind, but the heavy quiet that comes before something finally changes. By unanimous vote, Raylan Graham was removed as HOA president, effective immediately. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. A few days later, I got a call from Jonathan Keller, an investigator with the Georgia Office of Consumer Protection. Turns out, Raylan hadn't just abused her authority, she'd also embezzled HOA funds. Her signature was on fake maintenance invoices funneled through a shell company. It was all coming undone. The criminal case moved forward: felony aggravated battery of a minor, violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and criminal misuse of HOA authority. Raylan posted bail, but the woman who once strutted the neighborhood with a clipboard and pastel cardigan was nowhere to be seen. Her lawyer issued public statements about deep regret and emotional strain, but no one believed it. She carried that hammer like a badge of righteousness, and now it was the weight pulling her down. Meanwhile, Bella was healing slowly but bravely. The swelling in her fingers was going down, her spirit was coming back. She even cracked jokes about the hospital food, and me. I was building again. Not just the toy chest I'd left unfinished that day, but something larger. I started a neighborhood committee focused on ADA awareness. Cheryl and 3 other board members joined. We held community meetings to teach residents about inclusion, disability rights, and simple decency. At one meeting, A father stood up. His son had Down syndrome. "I used to worry about living here," he said. "Now I finally feel like I belong." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about justice for Bella. It was about changing the culture Raylan had poisoned and giving every parent the courage to speak up when someone threatens what they love most. Justice doesn't always come quickly, but when it does, you feel it deep in your bones. 6 weeks after the assault, Raylan Graham stood in court, flanked by 2 lawyers. The smugness was gone. Her face, once so sure of its power, was pale and afraid. Bella didn't come to the hearing. Her fingers were still healing, and I didn't want her near that woman. Instead, I sat in the front row wearing my pressed army blue S, and not for attention, but as a quiet reminder of who I was: a father, a veteran, a protector, and now, a witness. The courtroom was packed. Neighbors, journalists, disability advocates, even people from other counties had come. By then, the video had gone viral. Millions had seen it. Some still couldn't believe someone like Raylan could do something so violent. But I never doubted it. Evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it wears pearls and a name tag. The prosecutor laid out the charges: aggravated battery of a disabled minor, felony assault with a deadly weapon, and violations of federal disability law. Raylan's defense tried to frame it as a moment of mental instability, a lapse in judgment under emotional strain. But the judge didn't flinch. "You were not under attack," she said, her voice firm. "You were not provoked. You approached a child in a wheelchair with a hammer. That is not a lapse. It is a deliberate act of cruelty." Raylan was sentenced to 4 a broken bar. Raylan Graham was sentenced to 4 years in state prison, with mandatory psychiatric evaluation and community service to follow her release. The judge also granted our civil suit, awarding damages for Bella's medical costs, emotional trauma, and long-term therapy. To be honest, the money itself didn't matter to me. I would have lived in a tent and pushed Bella's wheelchair through gravel if that's what it took. But the ruling mattered. It acknowledged that what happened to Bella wasn't just unfortunate, it was criminal. It was wrong. And it wouldn't be tolerated. Not here, not anywhere, no matter who held the title of HOA president. After the sentencing, something unexpected happened. Neighbors began approaching me not out of pity, but with quiet honesty. Gail, who lived 3 doors down, admitted she'd once been fined for having a sensory swing for her autistic son. She'd quietly paid, just to avoid conflict. A young couple with a newborn shared that they'd removed a baby gate from their porch because Raylan claimed it violated uniform visibility. Curtis, an Air Force vet, told me he put up a small PTSD support sign on his lawn. Raylan had it pulled down within 48 hours. They all had stories. And until that day, none had spoken up. That was Raylan's real legacy, not just the hammer or the clipboard, but the silence she enforced through fear. We were determined to end the silence for good. Under Cheryl Hammond's leadership, the HOA board voted unanimously to adopt a new community policy, the Peterson Amendment, named after Bella's middle name. It barred any HOA officer from issuing citations against ADA-compliant medical or mobility equipment. It also required annual disability rights training for every board member. But we didn't stop there. With help from Ron, my attorney friend, we started a nonprofit, Neighborhoods for All. Its mission: to help families like ours stand up to HOA harassment and push for inclusive community policies statewide. Within 3 months, we'd received over 600 messages. Some were thank yous, but many were heartbreaking accounts from parents who had felt powerless and alone. We offered guidance, legal referrals, and most importantly, solidarity. And Bella? She was shining again. Her fingers healed faster than anyone expected, and she returned to her art with a new fierceness. Her drawings of butterflies now trailed streaks of fiery fast, brave, and beautiful. Her therapist said the experience had made her art even more expressive. We hung one of her pieces in the living room, a monarch butterfly, with bold letters underneath, "Still flying." That drawing meant more to me than any verdict or settlement. It proved Bella's spirit hadn't been broken, not by fear, not by pain, and certainly not by a woman with too much power and a hammer. Sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, I find myself standing by the front door, listening to Bella's soft humming as she colors, and the wind rustling through the chimes. It's peaceful, and not just the quiet itself, but the kind of peace that comes after a fight you refuse to lose. And people noticed. Our neighborhood changed. The ramp stays where it belongs. Bella's wheelchair sits proudly on the porch when she's outside, and not one persona, not a single Lonia has dared to complain. Instead, they wave, they smile, some even stop to ask how she's doing. Maybe that's the real justice. Not just prison time or policy reform, but bringing back humanity where it had been smothered. We didn't just win a battle, we lit a torch so others could see the path forward. It's been months since that terrible day. The garden has bloomed again, seasons have turned, and Bella, my brave, stubborn girl, is still smiling. Every morning she wheels herself out to the porch, a book in her lap and Oliver the teddy bear by her side. The butterflies return like clockwork, fluttering around her as if they remember her kindness. She waves to them, and sometimes they seem to linger, like they know. One morning, as I brought out her lemonade, she looked up at me and said, "Daddy, I think I'm glad it happened." I froze. "Why, sweetheart?" She smiled soft, but steady. "Because now people are nicer. To me, to everyone. Even the new girl down the street with the walker. She says nobody ever made her feel welcome before." I sat beside her, my throat tight. "You're the strongest person I know, Bella." She laughed. "Daddy, you say that every day." "Because it's true," I whispered. Justice didn't come just from a courtroom. It came from how our neighborhood changed. From kindness where fear once ruled. From voices rising where there used to be silence. We still have a long way to go. There are still places where even now, families like ours are still being ignored, mistreated, or forced out of their homes. But today, they know they're not alone. They know someone is watching, someone is listening, someone is willing to fight back. If you've made it to the end of our story, thank you. And if you've ever been in a situation like these, if you've ever felt small, silenced, or powerless, remember, your voice matters, your story matters, and you don't have to face it alone. If you believe in justice and love seeing how bullies get what they deserve, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel, HOA Stories. We share real life, gripping HO dramas every day that you won't want to miss. Your support helps us keep telling these stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.